to the Paint Pod, where we dive into the vibrant world of art through chatting to amazing artists about their life and their work. My name is Sarah Hodgkins. I am a muralist with Charlotte Designs and now, of course, a podcaster. Today, my guest is Andrew Hill, who is I think you call yourself an automotive artist. Is that?
Yes, yeah, that covers it pretty well. Yes,
Brilliant.
Yes. I do the odd, other bits and pieces, but I mainly work around automotive stuff, cars, etc. So yeah.
Brilliant. So, my first question to you, Andrew, is what sort of car does an automotive artist drive?
Well, it's not very fancy, but to be fair, I'm pretty lucky at the moment. We have got a T5 VW T5 camper van.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It is a little bit of a throwback when myself and my wife lived out in Australia back in a long time ago, before kids. Yes. We actually had a camper van and we did quite a lot of traveling around and so on. So it's always been a sort of bit of a dream to get another one and do a bit more exploring and that sort of stuff. So yeah, and that's what we do.
You use it to travel around the UK?
We do some camping and stuff like that. Yeah. And get out and about and, down to the beach. And it's really great because even just like on a Sunday morning, we go out to the local sort of there's like a little country park place near us and we go for a bit of walk, and then we just cook up some mushrooms and tomatoes on toast and have that in the van sitting in the morning air, which is really great. So yeah, something we really enjoy, and it doubles up as a bit of as transport as well. So when I go to shows to display art stuff, I can basically load that up with my stuff, and so it helps to pay for itself by doing some work every so often,
and that makes good sense. Yeah, I mean, there is a mural artist. I think he's based down in Devon, and he's got a camper van, and so when he's traveling around doing his work, he just stays in the camper van. I must admit, it's not something I've ever done. I think I'm missing the camping gene. I've never really got it, if I'm brutally honest. But I'm very envious of people who can.
Yeah. I have to admit, it's slightly harder work now we're a bit older than when we were in our 20s. Just coping with the sort of limited space and maneuvering around and. When the weather's wet, it's quite hard work, I have to say. When it's hot and dry, it's fantastic. You can't beat it. It's fantastic. So.
I'll take your word for that. I haven't camped since I was 15 years old. So there we go. Now, we were introduced through a mutual friend, and I'm going to put my hand on my heart now when she said to me that you were a car artist. Do you know, to be honest, I'm not sure what I was expecting. I'm not sure what was in my head, but whatever was in my head is not what I saw when I went onto your website.
Right.
It absolutely blew me away how beautiful, how almost sensitive your work is, how you managed to capture these, what are effectively big lumps of metal in this very beautiful way. And you combine color and a sense of speed and all of these things, and it's actually, you are clearly a very, very talented artist, and it really took me aback actually. And I showed my husband and he was like, wow, that's amazing.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. Thank you.
No, yeah, absolutely true. How do you do that? How do you find the beauty and the sensitive side of, as I say, what are effectively big lumps of metal?
Well, I suppose, to us sort of petrol heads, as we're known as, a lot of these cars are pieces of art in their own right. Although they are bits of metal, they have been shaped and crafted to look really, really beautiful. As I'm sure we'll touch on, I work as an automotive designer, and I work in the part of the business which is to do with sort of the aesthetic shape of the car. And people quite often say to me, "Oh, what do you actually do? What does that mean?" And I say, "Well, you know, when you see a car go flying past and you know, you say, 'Wow, that car looks amazing.' That's basically what our part of the job is. Obviously, we have to work with engineers and marketing people and everything else to create a product, but our part of that process is to make it, or what we believe to be, as beautiful, as good looking, as attractive as possible. So I suppose, you know, like when I'm working on the paintings, I'm always, you know, looking for cars that already have that sense that I know people are going to be attracted to because of what they are.
Yeah.
But then I've always been keen to try and portray them, to try and convey the emotion of what those cars mean, rather than just a picture of what it looks like. You know, if you want a picture of what it looks like, then you can have a photograph. But you know, I'm trying to add something into that, you know, which is it conveys the sort of like the emotion behind the car, the feeling of what it feels like at speed. You know, even I know there's no sound in a painting, but you know, just evoking that sense of what those cars sound like when people have seen them on the track or at shows and stuff like that, you know. So that's what I've always tried to do, you know, sort of like, is to add that element of you know, try to convey that sense of speed and that sense of movement and so on into the painting.
And I think that really comes through, and I think that was probably one of the things that surprised me the most. You know, the colors and that sort of sense of speed. There is an almost impressionist quality to your paintings, but there's also a slight whiff of, you know, those sort of retro posters that you used to get.
Yes.
For places. I've seen ones for Le Mans and for Monaco with race cars in. There's a kind of whiff of that about them as well. And so I think you get that beautiful, almost nostalgic feel.
I think that's really true. You know, a lot of the cars that, you know, that I paint, where I'm painting them because I think they will appeal to a number of people to either buy the original or to buy prints of them. They are cars that you know, capture those things. So there are some cars where you can kind of sense that the market for them is not very big because they're a bit odd or whatever, you know. And then there are other vehicles, iconic cars, you know, like from the sort of the 60s and the 70s and, you know, all the way up to now, where lots of people just love those cars, but also for a lot of them, it's about the livery that the car was in as well. You know, the branding of the car. You know, the one in particular, there was in the sort of 60s and 70s, there was a lot of stuff branded with the Gulf brand, which is basically like a baby blue and orange, and it got used on, and you know, people just love that color scheme, you know, and they go together with some really iconic cars from the late 60s, early 70s, and even into the 80s and 90s and so on. So you know, they're fantastic, you know. So
do you have a favorite car to paint, or even, I suppose, a favorite make of car to paint? I don't know.
I mean, I suppose there's two really, and both of them did come in the Gulf colors as well as variants. But there was the Ford GT40, which is on that side, just behind me there, which
open here next to me.
One at Le Mans in the Gulf colors in 68 and 69. And then the Porsche 917 as well, which is a hugely iconic car. And those that know will know, if you see what I mean, what that is. So, you know, those are probably the two, the two to paint. But, you know, there are just so many.
Yes, I can imagine.
Amazing cars, you know, and quite often I'm sort of like, you know, browsing on the internet and looking for ideas, and I go, I've got to do that one. Oh, no, I need to do that one. You know, which one am I going to do next? It's
that's interesting.
There's just so many cool cars, you know, that would love to paint. So
yeah. So you've noticed this already. You are a very successful artist, but you do this alongside a career, and we'll kind of talk more about that in a moment. But I'm interested in looking at how art kind of came into your life at an early age. Did you come from an artistic family? Was art very prevalent in your home when you were growing up?
A little bit, I guess. My dad used to sort of dabble around with some paints and stuff, and actually
Good.
my grandfather on my mother's side did quite a bit of stuff, and he was involved in printing businesses and stuff like that. So
Okay.
he did have quite a sort of an eye for that sort of stuff. But I don't know. There's nothing overtly sort of like artistic there, but I've always been, interested in doing it, and I loved doing to art. And I guess, like a lot of these things, you get, there was a time or a teacher who was very influential, so when I first went to secondary school, and I still look back and I'm not quite sure how I got away with this, but I used to, the art teacher used to run like lunchtime sessions. So you could go to the art room and do some stuff. But I used to also skive off PE and games. And
we don't
know, yeah, exactly. I can't, sort of condone that behavior. But I used to go down to the art room, and she just used to let me come in and carry on with whatever I was doing. And like I say, I look back on it now and I think, how did I get away with that? But maybe she just said to the PE teacher, "Look, I know he's here. There's no need to worry," or whatever. I don't, but that was what I did. So I
saw something in you that she was keen to bring out, perhaps.
Well, hopefully, yes. But and I used to just do. Lots of that sort of stuff. And I was really, at that stage in my life, I was really into like fantasy art and stuff. There's a guy called Roger Dean who used to do a lot of
Roger Dean. He did the
exactly.
Falcon covers and that, didn't he? Was it?
Yes, he did them for Yes.
And
various sort of like people like like the prog rock probably side of things more. And a guy called Frazetta, who used to do these amazing sort of, well, I'm not quite sure the right way of sort of classing them, but they were always sort of like, big monsters and muscled people and stuff like that, and I just used to love copying that stuff and painting those sorts of things. And that kind of like, was sort of in conjunction with sci-fi. So I used to build models of spaceships and things like that. Yeah, and so we were talking very much at when the first Star Wars movie came out and stuff like that. So there was a company that they set up called Industrial Light and Magic in California to do the special effects for those movies, and I was like, that is what I want to do. That's where I want to go. Obviously, didn't quite pan out like that, but that was at that point. That was what where I wanted to be, and I used to design sketch spaceships and stuff like that, so
fantastic.
It was really good,
And Roger Dean, that's not a name I've heard in years. I studied him. He was one of my selected artists at college to study.
Oh, right. Wow, that's amazing.
So that's really weird that you said that.
Yes.
Moment. Yes. So you clearly had a strong love of art in your sort of teenage years. So did you go on to art college? Was that a route that you took?
Well, I was, although obviously got sort of reasonably strong artistic background, I was also reasonably good at maths and stuff like that. So I ended up doing physics, maths, and art at A level, which is obviously not that usual. And at the college I was at, which was the sixth form college in Barnstaple in North Devon, which is where we lived at the time, I went on to do the art foundation year after sixth form,
Brilliant.
And while we were there, we went up to see a show at the Barbican in London, which basically all the design colleges in the country basically kind of had a stand, to show what they did. And there was like a stand from Coventry Polytechnic, as it was back in the day. And they had these amazing models of like a truck and a car, I think it was, and some drawings. And I thought, well, that looks really cool, and I felt like maybe to a certain extent it combined a bit of sort of, I'm not going to call it engineering side, but, like a bit more kind of analytical or mathematical kind of stuff together with the artistic side of stuff, and I didn't really know it at the time, but it was quite hard to get into apparently. But, I just that's what I'm going to go and do,
But it's sometimes it's not to know that it's hard to get
but it is, yes. So I applied for that and obviously went through that. And that's basically how I ended up in the automotive industry on the design side.
Okay.
And obviously, it really combines, it is an artistic based sort of career, because you're basically sketching and drawing up cars and then working with a team of people to turn those drawings into a three-dimensional product at the end of the day. Now, obviously, it's gets more and more complicated because you've got to be able to not just draw it, but then you've got to be able to make it. Someone's got to be able to manufacture it. It's got to be manufactured for a cost, etc., etc. But the principle behind it is still artistic. You're sketching, you're drawing, you're creating ideas for vehicles of the future,
How amazing. And that's quite a dream job, I would imagine, for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I would say so. I think I'd be the first to put my hand up and say it's been a great career. I've got to travel and to go places around the world and be involved in different bits and pieces. And it's a great job. Work with a great bunch of people and
how wonderful.
Really fun. So yes.
And have you done that since you left university? Has that been your?
Basically yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Had a few ups and downs along the way, but yes, in principle, yes.
That's life.
Indeed, yes.
Do you still sketch? I mean, you're using the word sketch, but in my mind, people who design cars, is that not all done on CAD machines? Do you actually still use pencil and paper to sketch?
Yeah. Sketch ideas and stuff. Yes. I mean, you're right. A lot of stuff is now done in CAD, and a lot of the younger designers, work directly in three-dimensional CAD on screen.
Okay.
Because they've got those skills, but I'm old. Sort of old enough that I didn't kind of pick them up at scratch. And they're really hard to learn. I can only do the really, really basic bits and pieces on some of those CAD programs. But we'll still sit and sketch, and you can, if you go into a meeting, you can always tell the designer in the meeting because he's the one drawing a car on his pad, while everyone else is talking about something to do with, how, we need to get on and get this project finished, and we'll be like, sketching away,
Do you know what? I find that quite reassuring that there's still people in sort of, automotive design who are using sketch pads. I actually find that quite, I don't know, reassuring in a way. Anyway, so I didn't know that. So thank you for telling me that. That's okay.
Better. Yeah.
It's good.
If you before the advent of the sort of some of these things, we would obviously do a lot of what we would call finished renderings and stuff, where you then effectively draw up a car and it's all highlighted and so on. We tend to nowadays to go from sketch into something like Photoshop and work it up from there, and some of the programs are amazing. You can take data from something and import it as an image and then sketch over the top of it in Photoshop and that sort of stuff.
I do a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes.
No, it's good. And it is useful. And I think that I love how, people of a certain age, shall we say, are trying these new technologies and trying to learn how we can incorporate them into our art practice. I'm certainly trying things out. And I think, I've got kids who are young adults and they will say, oh, Mum, have you tried this? Have you done this? And I think it's good to try and have a go at these things, even if we end up saying, do you know what, pass me a pencil and a sketch pad, I'm much happier.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, when I first started doing the sort of like the art stuff as a serious sort of like thought of this is going to be something I'm going to do, most of my work at that point was digital. I used to do a lot of digital paintings. So I would, create a sketch, and then I'd scan that in, and then I'd basically paint it on screen, using a tablet and so on.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It is the principle is very similar to painting in many ways. The way that you approach it, but it has, it also has some great tools within that you can use to your advantage. And you do have the ability to, effectively experiment with something. And then if you don't like it, you can delete that layer, and so on. So, there are some really interesting parts of the process. But at the same time, it's still an artistic skill, like
Absolutely.
people have said to me at shows, they say, oh, doesn't the computer do all the work for you, and
If only.
exactly. And I say, well, if your favorite, author has written her book or his book on a PC, has the PC written a novel for her? No, she's still inputting the creative quality into the machine, and that's still what you do with Photoshop, and those sorts of programs. You're still applying that, what you want it to look like, within that. You're just using, a more sophisticated tool than just a pencil at that point. Yeah. I guess in the in the old days, people, artists would create studies and so on, wouldn't they, of what they were going of a final picture, and I do that on Photoshop. So a lot of my original paintings, which are canvases, I will create, I like to call it, like my vision drawing, as it were, but of what I think it's going to be. And interestingly, because I tend to do those really, really quickly, they tend to have an energy about them which is really interesting in their own right, about the way the sort of like stuff is applied. And then I'll then take that and I will do a print of it, and I'll, from an old-fashioned point of view, I will then literally box that up and then use those grids to transfer it onto the canvas. And then quite often I'll get a long way in, and my wife will come down and she'll have a look and she'll say, oh, this is really dull. You've kind of like you're getting too tight. If you look at your original quick sketch on, from Photoshop, that's got a load of energy. You've got to get that back into the painting, and she's right, so she's my fiercest critic. I have to get her to come down and tell me what I need to do next,
We all need them.
Yeah, because you get to the point where you're like, oh, I've invested so much time in this, I don't want to mess it up, sort of thing, and but you have to take the brave pill, so to speak, and go back in with it. We go back in with a big brush and try and get some of that energy back into it. So
no, it's really interesting, and I've had several conversations with people over the 20 odd years I've been doing this. That sort of blurred line between artist and designer, it's a strange thing. Some people are definitely in the artist space, some people are definitely in the designer space, but there are certain people, and it sounds like you potentially might be one of them, I'm definitely one of them, where those lines are much more blurred, and it is a combination of, I think, design and artistry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I suppose the art of composing the picture is effectively designing how you want it to look. I mean, design is such an all-encompassing word, but that's the principle behind it, isn't it? You don't just, the in my case, the car is just not randomly positioned on the canvas. There's something behind where I want it to be and the angle that it's at, and how it appears to be coming out of the picture or going into the corner of the picture or whatever. So even when I'm doing the rough on Photoshop, I'll stick the thirds in on the screen, and sort of work around some of those sort of key lines, So although I tried, as you said at the beginning, very kindly, that they've got that sort of impressionist feel about them.
Definitely.
I do feel, or certainly for me, it's also still important that the proportions of the actual car and the key things like that the wheels look like they're correct, that the ellipses are correct, and those sorts of things are, it's still important that sort of foundation is correct, because otherwise I just look at it and go, that car doesn't look right. Exactly. Other and it probably doesn't always matter, but to me it's important that the car is sort of technically correct, and then you lay over the top of it those feelings of speed and blurring it out and whatever you want to do to add to the car. Yeah.
And I'm guessing your audience as well, the people who are buying your paintings, they want the car to look like the car looks like, because that's why they're buying the paintings. So like you say, if things are out of alignment, if things aren't quite right, they will notice.
That is true, yes, and and some of them are very knowledgeable about specific things, like, oh, that bit of branding wasn't on that car in that year, and stuff like that. So I do spend quite a bit of time researching the details of the car to try and make sure that I've got those sorts of things accurate, and it's not always easy with some of the stuff back from like the 50s and the 60s. There are less images of the cars available to sort of like to check and to to make sure. And you see something and someone's put, oh, this is such and such a car in this race, and then you do a bit more digging, you realize that they actually haven't got that information correct anyway. So there is an element, you can't just assume that the first thing that you see is actually technically correct either, that it's that is a picture or a photograph from that actual race that they're saying it's from, and stuff like that. So there's a fair bit of sort of work that I do just to sort of get that level of accuracy, or try to. Yeah.
A few years ago, I had to paint a Lamborghini for an autism ward.
Right.
I can assure you now, that was one of the scariest projects I have ever done in my entire life, because I knew if I got one single thing wrong, they'd have me. So let's flip now to the painting side of what you do. When did you start to paint your canvases and I guess sell them alongside your day job?
Well, so that started back in 2008.
Okay.
So I was working for a consultancy at the time, an automotive design consultancy.
Yeah.
And through various things that happened at the time, it went bust, basically went into receivership. Now, on the day that actually happened, which was the 16th of September, I can remember the date really clearly.
Wow, impressive.
Yeah. Well, it's not quite so impressive, because basically it was like, well, yeah, okay, well, there's other jobs around. So the next day, which was the 17th of September, was the day that Lehman Brothers went bust, if I've got my dates 100% correct. And literally within about 3 or 4 weeks, the whole sort of everything had collapses a bit over dramatic, isn't it? But basically there wasn't any contract work within the automotive business. A lot of the everything went sort of like pretty static for a while. There wasn't any work, so I was painting people's windows and doing other bits and pieces. But I thought, well, like, what else do I know how to do but to paint cars? So I took a punt. So by the time we get round to sort of July, there's a big event on the south coast called the Festival of Speed. Goodwood Festival of Speed, yeah, which is obviously probably the most well-known car show in the country. And I thought, okay, I'm going to create some art, and it was quite, because it's pretty expensive to exhibit there, and see what I can do. So I did all digital pieces. I had them printed on acrylic panel, quite big, and I literally just took down 5 sheets of MDF painted white with these acrylic panels fitted to them, and had those round. And I took a couple of commissions, and I think I sold, one or two of them. So it was like, okay, there's there's something here, and basically been doing it ever since, sort of like it goes up and down a little bit in terms of sort of how much time goes into it. Some of that's sort of related to, as we've said, like what's going on with the other work as well. Things just get a bit hectic sometimes. But yeah, that's where I started really, and I've been going to shows and exhibiting stuff ever since. It's good, and I've got sort of like quite a big portfolio of prints and so on the go, and done some really interesting things off the back of it as well.
So is most of your work commission work, or are you painting cars that you like and obviously hoping someone will buy them?
Yes, mainly. Yeah. I mean, I do some commission stuff as well, but I guess on the whole, it's generally I think, right, I'm going to do this painting, and quite often target that towards a specific show or event that I'm involved in, and work on that basis. And that's why I tend to stick to a lot of the sort of what I call the iconic cars, because that you can, that painting is more likely to sell, but then I can also do a limited run of prints off the back of it as well, knowing that I will probably be able to sell, some of those as well. So, that's, yeah.
And you've mentioned the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and there are quite a few other sort of car events. I mean, obviously I'm stone's throw from Silverstone, so
yes, yeah,
is one obviously that leaps to mind. You have a niche. I always tell artists that niching is the way to go, but your niche, my word, you take niching to a new level. But in a way, does that help you to be able to be very focused about where you're going to find your customers?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, I think that is part of what makes it it's kind of like it's kind of a double-edged sword, because a lot of people think car art's a bit weird, and they're like, well, I'm never going to put a picture of a car up in the living room, that sort of thing.
They need to look at your car art.
but at the same time, if you can get somewhere where you've got the right set of customers, then you are definitely, you've got a very targeted market. And I guess, there are less car artists than there are general artists just selling pictures of flowers or mountains or whatever. So, yes, from that point of view, it is definitely good. And that comes down to like, even like, sort of like specific shows. So, you're right. There are shows everywhere, now there's just so many shows. So, but you can go to, shows that are just for Aston Martins, or shows that are, stuff that's just for Ferraris and stuff. And so you're even more niche than just general automotive stuff, but when you get that right, it works, it works really well. It's fantastic,
Yeah, I can imagine
yeah.
Actually. I mean, my brain's going while I'm talking to you, but as I say, for me, knowing where your customers are as an artist is crucial. And for you, you're almost making that part easier, because you know where your customers are going to be.
That is true. You're right. But they're also quite hard to get to,
Okay.
Because, like when you go to some of these shows, like the people that are going to spend a reasonable, a serious amount of money, and it's, I mean, it's not serious by some art standards, if you see what I mean, but it's still quite a lot of money, then you need to be talking to people who've got that sort of money, and they're quite often tucked away in VIP areas and that sort of stuff as well. So it's not always, even when you go to a big show, always getting really close to those people, but that's part of the challenge, really. And and the other thing is really interesting is you just never know who's going to walk in you know, and go, "Well, that's really cool." You know, I've been at I was at a Ferrari show once, but I had a painting of Lewis Hamilton in a Mercedes Formula
Right.
One car, and the first person that walked in was like, "Well, I'm not really into cars, but that's really cool." So and he just, you know, and he bought it off the wall, you know, and
Wow.
you know, so it's, you kind of never know what who's going to buy what on any particular day. It's
No, that's
yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
And presumably, as I say, your website is great, and you sell directly from your website as well. Is
I
that
do.
correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And is that better for the prints, or is that better for the originals, or is it a bit of both?
That's mainly for the prints, to be
Mainly.
fair. Yeah.
Okay. How do you tackle pricing? Because when it's not your sole source of income, I guess, and I don't know this, but I guess you can be a little bit more flexible, shall we say? Or do you try to be very strict and maintain certain levels of pricing? Because there is a value in what you do, of course.
Yeah, I suppose from the point of view of prints and so on, I just market them at where I kind of, what seems sort of similar to what a lot of the other artists that
Okay.
I admire do, you know. So it's a sort of like a similar strategy, and I think interestingly, art is the one thing that, or one of the things where you can sort of like slowly increase the price as you become more popular. You know, you can just, like, you know, add the prices up. And I did recently, you know, like actually go back and think, oh, do you know, some of these, particularly the early digital prints and stuff, you know, I first started selling them in, you know, 2009, 2010, and actually the rate of inflation, you know, is
Absolutely
quite a lot by then. So I did actually go back last year and do a bit of a recalc on some of those prices, just to make it more sort of where it was, on the basis that I was selling them then at that price. So they should be, you know, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do the same thing there. With the originals, it's a little more difficult, you know, and but I seem to have got sort of roughly at this particular point in time, roughly where I think you know, I am, and I'm not as expensive as a couple of the other guys that I know who are very who are very well known and are kind of like, you know, at the top of the game, so as to speak, or what I would think in terms of automotive art. But I think it's reasonable, you know. And what's interesting is that, you know, obviously a lot of people that I sell these sorts of things to, you know, a lot of them are people who are self-made, people who've made a lot of money through business or whatever. So even though, you know, like they've just told me they own 5 Ferraris, they're still like, right, what can we do a deal for on this painting? You know, like they don't, you know, life is about doing a deal, you know. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, they're always like, yeah, okay, well, let's see, what can we do, you know.
Yeah, that's how they got to buy 5 Ferraris in the first
Absolutely
place.
Yeah, exactly, yes, yeah. And you know, even though, you know, relatively speaking, it's obviously, you know, like pin money, that's not the point. The point is, you know, you never pay the price on the sticker, you know. It's
Always want to
yeah,
haggle. Yeah.
absolutely, yes, yeah.
Talk to me about the artist in residence experience that you had at Aston Martin. 2014, I've got that at Le Mans.
That's right, yes.
How did that come about?
Well, that came about because I was just out of the blue rung up by somebody who, together with another artist, between them, they were sort of like trying to develop this business where they, both the artist and other artists who they thought were appropriate, of finding them sort of like an artist in residence spot, and then being involved in selling the stuff that was generated from that. And the guy who phoned me knew the chap who runs Aston Martin Racing, which is basically so AMR at the time was it's not totally run by Aston Martin itself. It was like run by another company who sort of like looked after the racing side, which is pretty common, you know, like in the automotive business. Yeah. And he said, "Oh, we've got this idea. We're looking for an automotive artist to basically go down to Le Mans and do this thing, you know, and then produce some work from it. Are you interested?" I'm like, "Yeah, obviously." So yeah, so it was really great. So it was amazing. I got accommodation with the team down in the hotel in town. So it was kind of like, you know, as embedded, I think they use, isn't it, the phrase, you know? So and I had a all access pass, you know, so I could go in the pits and you know, all through in the different racing areas and in the hospitality area and stuff like that, you know. And I just spent, because Le Mans quite a, you know, goes as a whole weekend event. I think I went down on the Wednesday, so you have qualifying on the Thursday at night, and then you have you know, various things happen before the race itself. And I just spent my time down there sort of like, you know, taking photographs, you know, sort of like doing some rough sketches of ideas and stuff that I thought I could do, and so on, you know. And it was quite good. And I halfway through the race, I managed to, you know, blag myself into the hospitality area, and I set the easel up and did a painting live on the spot, and sold it to one of the sponsors who was there. So that was really, I know, it was a really good event. So it was really good fun.
How do you think that helped develop your art practice? Because I was imagining being immersed in that. I suppose you are to an extent anyway with your job, but to be immersed in that kind of environment for a few days must have been, I don't know, sensory overload. How do you think that helped you to develop your art?
I think there was two things there. I suppose because I had to like create quite a lot of art from it. It really helped me to think about like different things that I could paint, you know, or different ways of looking at the vehicles, you know. And I did some quite nice. Well, you know. They weren't my usual stuff, but I did some stuff of like, you know, guys working on the cars in the pits and things like that, which I wouldn't normally do. But I quite like that atmospheric sort of like feeling. So, you know, I suppose that was the main thing, really. It was just gave me the opportunity to sort of see a bit more, you know, what goes on behind the scenes. It was an amazing experience, you know, like, and for someone like myself, obviously, you know, to get that access and so on, to, you know, to get sort of behind the scenes was really fantastic.
Oh, I can imagine.
Someone I met actually at one of the shows, he was I was selling, this was at the Autosport show, which is in Birmingham.
Right.
This was around a similar time. In fact, may even have been a little bit earlier, 2000 and I don't know, maybe 2011, 2012, something like that. He was building a business basically selling packages for people to go to motorsport events. Gotcha. You know, and his main one is Le Mans, but he also does Le Mans Classic and Spa in Belgium and stuff like that. And I was next to him, so we just started talking and stuff. And he has a sort of like a big setup at Le Mans where all his guests come and they camp, but he's got a massive marquee. It's got the food and the drink and a bar and all that sort of stuff. And he was like, "Can you do me like some, you know, take some of your prints and turn them into massive banners to go around the inside of the marquee?" So I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So basically every year or every other year when we do this, we create some banners and stuff. And I go down and take my, you know, canvas and stuff like that and spend the entire weekend painting, as well as going to pop over and watch some racing. He's got big screens in the marquee so you can watch what's going on and everything. Right. You know? And that's been really, really great, you know, because you know, I've sold quite a few bits and pieces to people there. They've seen it going on and everything. So and it's really because of the day job, in inverted commas, actually I do a lot of painting at events because I don't often get that amount of time all in one go to actually, to create something. So it's a
win-win.
It's a win-win. Exactly. Yes. People see what you're doing and they can see that it's real, as it were. And at the same time, it's time for me to actually be able to do some stuff as well, get some stuff finished. Yeah.
So you've mentioned the live painting events, and I saw on your website that you do that kind of thing. I've done a few of those over the years as well. How do you enjoy live painting events? How does that kind of fit into your overall practice?
Yes, it does. Yes. It's really good because people get really engaged coming into, to see you do it. And I don't have any, I'm not shy about doing it or anything. I don't have any problems about, like just getting on. No, exactly. So it's it's really good. And like I say, it's a great, some of the events are like 2 days or 3 days. So I get like, sort of 3 8-hour days to actually get on with some work and stuff, which is good, and then people are like, oh, I'd like to buy, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm like, no, that's what I'm here for,
Yeah.
So,
yes, I get that a lot as well. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, and we have touched on this, which is, I normally finish up by talking about how you physically produce your work. But we kind of talked about that at the beginning with the using digital means by which to create sketches and so forth. But just talk us through very briefly the process of how you're sitting there with a blank canvas, how you actually go through the process of producing your artwork.
Well, if I've thought of a car that I think, okay, I think this will make a good painting, as you've probably seen, I work a lot around sort of like how the light is falling across the painting or where the position. I mean, one of the great things about Le Mans is that it's 24 hours, so you get like a lot of sunset scenes. You don't get that with a lot of motor racing stuff, but it's obviously one of the great things is that you can use the golden hour kind of colors and stuff,
of course.
which I really enjoy doing. But I will kind of like quite often just literally like little sort of like thumbnails kind of sketch up what I think an angle would be. And then I will, like, either through photographs and stuff that I've taken or, like what's available on the sort of like the internet, I will, find something that is roughly the right sort of angle. And then I'll bring that into Photoshop and I'll manipulate it around until I get what I want and paint in the sort of like the background and stuff. So it's very much taking something and from one environment and placing it into the environment that I want it, so that's the sort of like the main process. I mean, I did one at Le Mans. At Le Mans, a lot of the racing is actually on public roads. They just get closed up for the weekend because it's a big circuit. I can't remember now. It's like 16 kilometers or something all the way around. I can't remember the exact. And there's one bit where it goes into what's known as the Porsche curves, and the public road goes up to a certain point, and then the public road would normally go off to one direction, but on the when the race is being run, it's basically connects into a bit of dedicated circuit that then goes into the sort of like the main area where all the pits are and stuff like that. This bit's cool. So I actually, on Google, I use the little blue man to go down onto the road, and basically snip the view looking up that bit of road as it goes towards the Porsche curves. And then in Photoshop, I basically warped it and stretched it and so on, because it's quite a wide angle view. So I had to kind of really, manipulate it. But it was just to get that sort of start point of like, this is what the road looks like and where it's disappearing into the distance, and, what that bit looks like as it curves away, and that weekend was pretty, the weather was not very good, but there was the one bit during qualifying where the sun came out at like 9 o'clock at night while they were doing their sort of, pre-testing, pre-qualifying runs and stuff, you know. So I based my painting around that particular point, you know, like while they were qualifying for pole position. So I still had a bit of the sun and all of that sort of stuff in the painting.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah, exactly.
And you work in acrylics when you're painting on canvases?
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah.
Why acrylics? Why not oils?
I mean, I tried oils when I was younger. I just I felt it would be easier to work with, basically. I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose there's two things there. The first thing is that because they dry so fast, you know,
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, you can go to a show and you can, you know, and you know, literally like 15 minutes after you put your last blob of paint on, you can stick it back in the cardboard box and in the van and it's ready to go. You know, that would be very difficult to do some of that stuff with oils, I think. So there is that sort of immediacy about it, you know, that I like, you know. And, you know, being brutally honest about it, you know, if there's something that you've done and you don't like it, you can get the white out and, you know, blot it out and go over the top, you know. It's a bit like Control Z, obviously, you know, but
we've all done it. Exactly. And do you work with brushes? Do you work with knives? Is it a combination? What are you actually using to apply the paint?
I use brushes 99% of the time.
Okay.
Yeah. I have messed around a little bit with like old, like, you know, plastic credit card type things and smeared the paint.
Oh yeah.
Stuff. Yeah. You know, and I have been thinking, I should definitely, you know, get some palette knives and actually have a go at doing some other stuff. But at the moment, it's 99.9% brush work, you know. And I tend to, you know, if I know roughly what the kind of like the main color of the canvas is, I tend to paint the whole thing
right
in that first, or even like an orange or a red or something. So there's something kind of almost coming through the paint, and then I'll grid the canvases up or grid up basically where I need it. Don't tend to go over the whole thing. I just, you know, the bits so I can then put in the key elements of the car. And and then paint it from there.
Yeah. And I get that. I have to say, I don't grid up much, but when I'm painting cars, I grid them up because otherwise they just end up looking expression. Yes. Okay. Before we leave the sort of the actual physical painting, we talked about the feelings of speed that you're able to create in your paintings. How do you do that? And this might be a really hard question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because for me, that was one of the things that, as I said right at the very start, was one of the biggest surprises when I was looking at your work. How do you create that sense of speed within your paintings?
Well, I think, I mean, some of it is kind of like almost the kind of like the cartoon lines of just, you know, sort of like the, you know, the speed lines coming off the back. But I tend to sort of like, you know, add some of that stuff even into the sort of like, if the car's coming towards you, you wouldn't have that effect because it would be going away. And once I'm kind of like overall happy, I do tend to go around and just sort of like, almost just add in random sort of like marks and stuff off the sides as if it's kind of like you know, those bits are moving in front of you, you know. So it's a kind of a combination of that sort of perspective element of stuff streaking away or, you know, towards the thing, or, you know, like, you know, if it was a you know, you see a lot of photographs of things that are moving fast. It's not necessarily just cars, you know, and the, you know, like when they pan the camera, the object itself is in focus, but everything else is blurred, isn't it? You know, so there's that element of that kind of aesthetic that gives you that feeling.
It's very impressive, I have to say.
Thank you. But I tend to sort of like, you know, kind of almost like as you get further down the vehicle, as it were, tend to almost sort of start to break up the kind of the lines of it to a certain extent. So it looks like it's, you know, vibrating, you know, it's got that kind of, you know, mechanical kind of movement, not just the fact that it's moving in a direction, but the fact that it's actually kind of, you know, vibrating in some way. I don't know. It's
yeah, no. It makes perfect sense. Like I say, I just, you know, I mean, I suppose it happens in all different types of art, but for me, you know, cars particularly, to get that sense of speed in paint in a very static format, that takes some doing, and it's a difficult thing to
it's
do.
very kind of you to say so. I mean, I do know, I don't like painting cars where they're just stationary, you know, and quite often people will say, if somebody's, when we're talking about a commission, I tend to say, you know, I would like to, if I'm going to do your car, I will do it moving. I don't like, you know, because sometimes you get people say, oh, I'd like it in front of my house, sort of thing, you know, and I'm like, nah, that's not really what I do.
Nice, good sentence. No.
But it's so yeah, I tend to focus more on kind of like getting that feel of speed, you know. That's
yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. So who are your influences? Whose work do you admire?
Well, that's a good question. There's an automotive artist called Tim Lazelle, who who I think is very good. And there's also another chap, Nicholas Watts, who's quite a lot older. He did some great stuff.
No, I'm always interested, you know, what influences people have, because, you know, we all have them. We all admire other artists, whether they're alive, dead, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lady whose stuff I really love called Hester Berry. Ooh, I mean, it's nothing to do with automotive art. And it's funny because I saw something online and I thought, oh, that looks like Bideford or Westward Ho Beach, where I come from, you know, and it was, and she, as it turns out, so she lives in North Devon, and and so, but her stuff is just so both, it's so free, the way she paints, but the colors are so evocative, and it's like, it's just, you know, she really captures, and she does some of her stuff. She's got like, you know, winter sort of scenes, and then summer, and somehow she manages, the colors just seem to capture you can tell that it's winter just by the color of the blue rather than the summer blue, you know. It's know, and I suppose that's always when it's somewhere that you know, and you see the, you know, the river and stuff. It's like, oh, that's really beautiful interpretation of that spot, you know. Nice. So so got some of you know, bits of, you know, snips of her stuff, you know, on the wall as stuff to try and sort of like remind me not to get too tight, you know. Try and
It's always the artist's nemesis, isn't it?
Exactly, yes.
Free up, shake. Okay, so I'm just going to finish up by saying, you know, what's next? What are you hoping that this will achieve going forward?
Well, I suppose at the moment, as we've discussed, this has been something that I've been doing. You know, hobby would be a strong word, because it's been a bit more encompassing than that.
It's a bit more than a hobby.
But while there's still time, in inverted commas, you know, it's something I'd like to do more permanently, you know, and it's just a matter of trying to work out when that would be. So, you know, I'm at the moment trying to sort of work out a way of finding some people that I can almost like, you know, sort of partner with and be sort of involved in. So there are quite a few sort of like big motoring clubs and stuff, you know, particularly on like supercar clubs and stuff like that, and various different groups of people involved in high-end car. Absolutely. And I am trying to work out ways of, you know, getting involved with those to try and have a more sort of permanent connection with certain types of people, you know. So to enable me to, you know, to work with them, to exhibit with them potentially, and, you know, and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm trying to do, so that at some point in the future, timing unknown still, kind of step away from the day job and do this in such a way that, you know, that can make enough money from it to be able to continue doing that. And then at the same time, you get some more free time to do some of the other stuff which I enjoy, which is like going out into the mountains and hill walking and stuff like that. So
very good, very good. So you see, you were avoiding sport all those years ago. And
yeah.
Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
And to you, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's been
my pleasure. Yeah. If you'd like to see more of Andrew's work, and I strongly urge you to do that, you need to go to www.automotive-images.co.uk, where you can see an awful lot of very beautiful artwork that is as a result of Andrew enjoying himself with other petrol heads.
Yes, thank you very much.
Huge thanks to Andrew Hill for joining me today. You have been listening to The Paint Pod with me, Sarah Hodgkins. Please do like, subscribe and share with your friends. Until our next wander through our audio gallery of ideas and inspiration, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.